If you're new to poker and if you're serious about getting better, there are a couple of things you need to understand. Just simple concepts that most beginners skip, and then they wonder why they're stuck at the micros. These basics will help you make smarter decisions, stop guessing, and you start building real good habits that will actually make you money at the table. So let's break them down one by one. Let's start with position. Position means where you sit at the table compared to the dealer button. You can either be in position, which means you're acting last post flop, or you can be out of position, which means you're acting first. In poker, position equals power. Acting last is a huge strategic edge. You get to see what your opponent does before you act, and that gives you more control over the pot and you can make smarter decisions. And in spin and goes, the position depends on how many players are left at the table. Let's break it down. Okay, so here you see that 3 players are left. We have the button, we have the small blind, and we have the big blind. We call this a 3-way or 3-handed situation. In this setup, the button is the best seat. It acts first pre-flop, but your last post-flop. That's why we call the button in position, and the small blind and the big blind will be out of position. Yeah, you see it here again. The button player will always be in position against the small blind or the big blind. When we are down to 2 players, we are now heads up and the situation changes slightly. Now the button becomes the small blind, which acts first pre-flop and last post-flop. So now the small blind is always in position. And a lot of beginner players confuse these two situations. They confuse when they are 3-handed. Here the small blind would be out of position compared to the big blind, but heads up, the small blind is the button, so he will be in position against the big blind. Next up, ranges. A lot of new players only think about their own hand, but good players think in ranges. And the range is all possible hands someone could have, not just the one specific hand that you're holding. And as I said before, most recreational players usually think only about their hand and not about all the possible hands your opponent can have. Let's say the button raises pre-flop. You will very likely not have a hand like 7 deuce off. You will have way more likely hands like ace king, broadways, pocket pairs, offsuited ace axis, suited ace axis, but also a couple of weaker hands like suited connectors, for example. And as you get better, you'll start guessing ranges based on actions and positions. That's what good players do every hand, every street. But now let's take a look how a poker range actually looks like. So this is a range matrix. On the right side, you see all suited hands. So queen 6 of hearts, king 7 of spades, ace king of clubs. Here on the left side, you see all the offsuited hands. So jack 8 with 1 heart and 1 spade, etc. And here right in the middle, you see all pocket pairs from deuces to aces. And each individual hand, for example ace king, consists of a certain amount of combinations. I broke it down with ace king, and you see there are 4 combinations of suited hands. So you have ace king of spades, ace king of clubs, ace king of hearts, and ace king of diamonds. And then you have 12 combinations of offsuited combos, which makes a total of 16 combos per hand. And this is what you usually see when you see a poker range. It is usually shown in the percentage form. This, for example, is a 28.7% range. This is what you probably hear sometimes in a stream or something. So he's raising a 30% range from the button, which usually means that someone is raising the top 30% of hands, which is looking somewhat like this. So these percentages help us visualize how loose or tight a player in a certain situation is. And they are built in most pre-flop charts as well. And that will also be our next topic, how to read pre-flop charts. Because from my experience, there's a lot of confusion for beginner players to actually find the correct spots in the charts. So pre-flop charts tell you how to play a certain situation pre-flop. When to raise, when to fold, when to 3-bet, etc. based on your position and stack size. And they're not just for pros. Actually, this is one of the fastest way to improve your game as a beginner. So now here you see our 3 pre-flop charts. And yes, when you first look at them, they look a little bit overwhelming, but I will break them down for you step by step, so you will always find the right situation. So let's start with the 2 main panels. The charts are divided in the 3-way part and in the heads-up part. And we already discussed the difference in the positions part. And what you see here in these panels is the actual stack size. And we always talk about effective stack size. The effective stack size is always the stack size of the shorter stack. And all of these panels on the top show you the actual position. So here is the bottom position. Then you have the small blind versus button min raise. This is when the button is raising and then you are in the small blind. And this situation is small blind versus button limp. This is when the button is limping and you are next to act in the small blind. Small blind versus big blind means when the button is folding and the small blind is first to act. And here on the right side, this is when one player is busted, so you're only 2 players left, you're heads up. And this is when you're heads up small blind or also the button. And this is how you play when the button is raising and you're in the big blind. And this is when the button is limping and you are in the big blind. So you see there are all situations are covered. At the beginning, it will for sure be a little bit overwhelming, but just go step by step. Next, you see the range matrix. And this is the actual strategy that you should play. And in this example, this is how you should play when you have 16 big blinds or more and you are sitting on the button. This is the strategy. And then here on the right side, you see the legend. But I'll show you in a simple example how to actually use this. Now you see a situation where we are sitting at the button and we have queen jack offsuited and we are 25 big blinds deep. And now when we are clicking on this panel here, 16 BB plus on the button, we can see what we should do with queen jack off, right? So queen jack off is this a little bit darker red. And here in the legend, it says 2x raise. And here on the right, you see what you're doing if your opponent is going all in, right? So you're raising 2x, so double the blind, only min raising. That's the only size we are using from the button. Never 3x, never 2.5x, only 2x. And we are folding against an all-in, but we also would fold if someone would re-raise non-all-in. Re-raise non-all-in means if we are raising 2 big blinds and this player, for example, raised to 6 big blinds, or this player raises to 6 big blinds, then we would fold this hand. It is not strong enough to call, even if we are in position. And yeah, that's basically it. So you have all of these hands. So for example, if you would sit here and you would have jack 7 suited, you would also raise. But if you would have a hand like 9-8 offsuited, you would simply fold. If you would have a hand like ace-jack offsuited or ace-jack suited, you would raise, but you would call if one of these players would go all in. These a little bit lighter red is that these hands you would call against a non-all-in raise, but you would fold against an all-in re-raise. Good, so I prepared another example. Here you see the button is now raising, right? So button is raising, and we just assume we are now here in the small blind. And then we will click on this button. So we will click on this one here, 16 BB plus, and then you see the strategy here, right? And you see with these hands, we would like to call, right? So with the suited ace axis, with a couple of offsuited and suited broadways, we would call. And then with hands like ace-9 suited and better, ace-10 offsuited and better, and pocket fives to pocket jacks, we would go all in. And only with our strongest hands, queens, kings, and aces, we would re-raise to 2.5x the amount of the initial raise, right? So if our opponent is raising to 2 big blinds, we would re-raise to 5 big blinds. If this is a recreational player and he can also use bigger sizings like 3 big blinds, then we would raise to 7.5 big blinds. Okay, so this should give you all the information you need to navigate through the charts, and that covers also the essentials that I wanted to present today. If these concepts felt very basic, it's because they are, but they are very important and you need to nail them because they accrue every single hand. You need to know what position is, how to play pre-flop. This is your bread and butter to actually make good decisions at the table, and this is the beginning of your journey. And as I said, these charts are totally free. You can just grab them. They are in the description below. If you like the video, as always, subscribe, like. This will help us a lot make more of these videos. And if you have questions, drop me a comment. I'll read everything and I will answer every comment. See you in the next one.